Hello, this is Maureen here for Detailed Church. I'm bringing you lesson 6 in our reading music series, and today we're going to focus on choir music. Choir music is a little bit different to read because you're going to see a lot of information and not necessarily all of that information is yours. So let's talk about a few things before we start looking directly at it. So whenever you are in a choir, you are specified into a vocal part. We have sopranos, altos, tenors, and basses. Now sometimes there will be another part called a baritone. That's kind of the place between a tenor and a bass. Sometimes if you don't have enough men and they're going to sing just one part together, that is called a baritone line because it's a mix of the two. If you are talking about good old just voice classifications, there are other ones like mezzo-soprano where you're kind of in between an alto and a soprano, but that's not what we're talking about today. So typically these are your four main voice parts, and the way they are listed on the screen is how they will appear when you are reading notes. Basses are always at the bottom, tenors, altos, and then sopranos, and that'll make a little bit more sense in a moment. Now it's also important because I'm going to show you three different examples that you understand that sometimes the stem direction in choir music doesn't follow the rules of stem direction like it does when you're reading just good old music on the staff. When you're reading regular parts, maybe a piano part or a violin part, for example, you would switch the stem direction at the middle line. Here, we're not going to follow those rules. When we're reading choir music, we're going to worry about specifying whose voice part is whose. So typically, your stems will start going up if your sopranos or tenors start to sing a different rhythm than the basses. And your altos and your basses, their stems will go down if their parts start to look different rhythmically than the sopranos and the tenors. Well, let's dive in and take a look at what that looks like on actual music. So the first example we're going to look at is the song Praise the Lord in a Song. So if you look at the top, you're going to see that we are looking at an SATB, so soprano, alto, tenor, bass, and keyboard. So that means we're going to have two different things to look at on this page. We have a piano part as well as a choir part. And you can really see that down here when we get to measure 4. The piano part is down here at the bottom. It's just always at the bottom. It's never on top. And up here we have two lines of music, the top line for our sopranos and altos, and the bottom line for our tenors and basses. So the piano part will always be at the bottom because primarily this is choir music. It is supported by the piano part. So they're always going to be on top because it's supported by the base of the piano part. So think of it like the foundation. The foundation is always on the bottom, and that gives them what they need to build the rest. So looking back at what we've talked about, I see 4, 4. So I know we have 4 beats in each measure, and a quarter note gets each beat. I see 2 sharps. This is my key signature. I see sharps. I see an F sharp and a C sharp. That means I need to remember them for the entire song. And here's my tempo marking. We're going 140 beats per minute. That is pretty quick. So I would say that's probably up there in the presto range. So this is a quick song. This is a song actually we have not done yet, but I hope the choir will get to it hopefully in the fall. You'll see the choir is not singing any harmony. If you read these pitches, we have A's in both our treble and bass. We've got D's, E's, F sharps, G's, and A's. So we're singing in unison. And if you keep following along, we sing in unison for a while. So we keep singing in unison, we keep singing in unison. Oh my goodness. Then you get to this hot mess at the bottom of the page. This is measure 17. You'll see that we have measure numbers at the beginning. In measure 17, we finally split into what choirs love to do, which is 4-part harmony. So we've got notes for our basses on the bottom, notes for our tenors here on top, then our alto, and then our soprano. And you'll see that all of our stems still match direction. That is because everyone's singing similar rhythms right now, but I'm about to show you where we are going to suddenly change. But this is what it looks like when we start to sing in 4-part harmony. So we're going to scroll down a little bit. And here's our first example, right here at the end of this line. Our sopranos have 2 quarter notes, while our altos have a half note. Since the altos have a half note, their stem is going down. Up here at the top, we have 2 different notes, so we don't have matching rhythms. So our sopranos have stems going up for their quarter notes. You can see this again on the next line down. Sopranos have stems going up because their rhythm is different than the alto, as well as the tenors. The tenors are now different than the basses. Their stems go up while the basses go down. And you can see that through the rest of the line as well. So this song is pretty straightforward for a choir part. We're supported by the piano part down here at the bottom. We've got some dynamics. We've got all kinds of good stuff. We've got accidentals. Here's an 8VA that'll come in later. So this is pretty straightforward. So let me take you to a different song. So this song is called More Like You, Lord, May I Be. Again, it's for SATB, so our soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. But this song is a cappella. That means for voices only. So there is no piano part on this page. Everything is just for voices. And as we start out, we are in 4/4 time, so we still have 4 beats in a measure, and our quarter note gets 1 beat. I don't see any sharps, and I don't see any flats. This tells me I'm in the key of C. And we are at a very drastically different tempo. We are at 76 beats per minute, which means this is a nice slow song, maybe adagio or andante. And that tells you it's going to be a moving kind of song. And right off the bat, you can see one of these places where our stem directions are different. Right here in the men's part, our tenor has the stem going up for their quarter note, but our basses have the stems going down for a pair of eighth notes. So as you go along, this again is looking pretty straightforward for a choir piece. Here's one of these places where a lot of people tend to get confused. Our sopranos and our altos are going to sing these 2 pitches at the same time, but they are currently staggered. If we tried to write those 2 pitches directly on top of each other, they would overlap and it would kind of look like a big filled in number 8. It would be very unclear as to what was going on, so we'll stagger them, but both people are starting their rhythm here on beat 4. You'll see something similar over here on the word your. Anytime you have 2 notes that are next to each other that need to be played at the same time, we just stagger them. So they're more on a diagonal, otherwise they would be blurred and you would not be able to read what they're doing. So here we have a lot of dynamics. We have a mezzo forte, so we're medium loud, to a pianissimo, which is very soft, up a little bit to piano, which is just soft, and you'll see that we change time signature. This seems to happen a lot in choir music, and I'm not really sure why. But we don't like to use weird meters like 6/4 time with choir. I'm not really sure why, but you'll see that there's a lot of 2/4 measures that appear in this song. And honestly, they did very well with them, so good job, choir people, if you're out there watching this one. Here our men pick up the spotlight. The ladies are resting up here at measure 12. The men have everything. They have the melody and the harmony. So here the tenors have it. It's not written, but it's implied that they have the melody. Right here it switches, however. The basses pick up the melody. That's why that M-E-L is written underneath this line. As we continue on, you're going to see a D-I-V. What happens here, you'll see 2 notes are here. We have 2 notes with our stems going down. That means our basses have 2 pitches they need to sing. So we would take our group and we would split them in half. So if we had 4 basses, we would have 2 people sing the top note and 2 people sing the bottom note. And your tenors are up here singing their own melody line. So that divisi is just for our basses on this beat 3 and 4 half note. So as you go through, we see all of these dynamics come back again. Sometimes you'll see that our words shift places. Here we've got words above and below the staff. This is because the alto and the tenor have a different rhythm. Their lyric is in between, it's closer to their notes, and they need to read these lyrics to follow their rhythm. However, that is not what the bass and the soprano are singing. They're just singing one word and holding it out. So sometimes you'll see that our lyrics will go above and below, and that's because the sopranos and basses need to sing a different rhythm to their lyrics. So here you see a crescendo, poco, a poco. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And as we scroll through, you see more divisis. This one is a split for all of the ladies. We have more sopranos, so we certainly split our sopranos. Here, it's higher. We split our sopranos again, and we have a lot of splits. Typically, you will find a lot more soprano splits because some sopranos can sing very high and some can sing high, but not quite as high as they wish they could, and that's okay. As we finish through the rest of the song, things look pretty normal until we get to the very end. All of a sudden at measure 47, we're going to go slower. Here, everyone is singing in unison, U-N-I-S. Here we've got G's, C's, F's, and A's. Anytime a choir sings in unison, it's important because we want you to hear the lyric. We want you to hear just the words. If we wanted you to take that and have more of a feeling about it, we would sing it in a specific harmony. Maybe a sad one if we wanted you to be more pondering about it, or more of a happy rhythm and happy harmony if we wanted you to think of it in more of a happy fashion. Anytime we sing it in unison, we want you to really just listen to the lyric. So right here at the end of the song, that is what we do. We sing here just in unison all together. And at this point, it's an important one because we are just repeating the title of the song. More like you, Lord, may I be. And we're letting you know that's the end because then we did a very graceful amen. So I got one more to show you. And this one looks a little bit different. Here, instead of having 2 lines for our choir, we have 4 lines for our choir. So right now we're in the middle of God Rest You Merry Gentlemen that we performed on Christmas Eve. So we're in the middle, so you won't see the normal stuff we see at the beginning of the song. So here we are, I see 1 flat. That would tell me we're in the key of F. In this case, I know we're in the key of D minor. Down here, you see 1 complete measure. I see 1, 2, 3, and 1 more quarter tells me that most likely we are in 4/4 time. We are at a quarter note equals 66, and man, is it slow. That is a good old, at least adagio, if not a largo. It is very slow, and this was a quick song. To jump to such a slow speed was a challenge for all of us because it was really slamming on the brakes. So each voice part now has its own line. We have soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. You're going to notice your tenor is written in treble clef. All the other times it has read bass clef. But if you look very closely, this treble clef looks a little bit different. It has an 8 attached to the curl at the bottom. This tells us that our tenors are going to read in treble clef, but they are going to sing these pitches 1 octave lower. So even though this note looks higher than the D that our sopranos are singing, if we sang this D an octave lower, it's actually the same pitch that everyone else is singing. So you would just sing it 1 octave lower. This comes in handy for them because they'll tend to sing higher pitches, so they won't need to read as many ledger lines. So this really actually helps them out a good bit. If you're the piano player, you just need to remember to play it down the octave. Here is a really important symbol. This appears in lots of music. It is very much in instrumental music. Occasionally it'll even appear in my piano music just to tell me that there needs to be a break there. This is a breath mark. Instrumentalists will all breathe together here and then come back in. But as choir people, yes, we will breathe together, but it tells us a little bit more. Here, when we performed this, we did a really hard T on the word not. We then had a very distinctive pause. Because if you notice, it says fear not and then a comma. So we made a very distinct phrase, fear not, then said the angel. So we made more of a phrase out of it, and that is what our breath marks do in choir music. They create phrases, and they dictate what we need to do with the words around them. So as we read on, you'll see the reason that we no longer are reading necessarily on 2 lines and are now on 4 lines is because our rhythms are drastically different in certain places. A lot of times you'll notice that maybe somebody's moving on a different word. That would make reading all of this very complicated because lyrics would continue to shift lines. We've got notes that would be facing different directions. So you're going to see as we go through, lots of things were different, and that's why this section is written on 4 separate lines. So as you can see, we have different rhythms down here for the altos and the men as opposed to the sopranos. Here the altos are back with the sopranos and the men are singing something different. Here the men are singing something together and here the ladies are singing something together. And then we get over here and things start to get crazy because we're building back up to come back in all together. And you'll see once we got past here, we switched back to 2 lines of music. So we split into these 4 lines just to make reading the different rhythms and lyrics easier for the person reading the choir music. So as you notice, there are some extra symbols that appear in choir music. And yes, these appear in other pieces of music, instrumental and piano, but they are more readily used in choir music because we need to inform the singers of more information, especially since their notes are so condensed. So again, MEL is a designation for which part has the melody. Typically, if it is above the treble clef line, that means the sopranos have the melody. If it's below the treble clef line, the altos have the melody. Same with the bass clef. It's above, the tenors do. If it's below, the basses do. Sometimes it'll just tell you that all of the men have the melody, while the ladies are maybe singing a harmony. Another common one is DIV. As I mentioned, that was divisi, and this just means we need to split parts. This, again, you will see in instrumental music. If all of your clarinets are reading one line of music and they need to split into a harmony, then yes, your ones would stay on the top note and your twos would split to the bottom note. So this is the same as we see in choir music. That voice part would split. Maybe 3 altos would sing the top note and 4 altos would sing the bottom note. One of our other common markings that does appear in other music, but is more readily seen in choir music is the breath mark. And it just looks like a comma. And it's above. So it's not a comma below, it's a comma above. And what it does is it simply tells you we all need to breathe. And typically, it also means we want a moment possibly of silence, or we need that break altogether. So breath mark sometimes means more than just, hey everybody, let's breathe together. Sometimes it'll mean we need to finish a phrase together, we need to give a hard consonant at the end of a word, or we need a pause to denote what exactly the lyric is delivering. So there might have been some other markings you saw throughout, and I talked about some of these as we went. Molto rubato is one that I see a lot in piano music. Rubato kind of just means to play freely and with feeling. So molto means you're going to put a lot of feeling. You can play with the tempo and make it speed up and slow down. I do this a lot in the slower songs that I play, typically for offertories. DIM with a period is for diminuendo. A diminuendo is the same as a decrescendo. Why it has 2 names, I'm not really sure. But a diminuendo would mean that you are starting at a louder tempo and gradually getting softer. A molto rit, I mentioned it earlier. Rit stands for ritardando, so we're going to gradually, or in this case, movingly get slower. ACCEL is for accelerando, so we would suddenly start to get faster. Here's my favorite one, subito, S-U-B with a dot. That is subito, so that means suddenly. So where we saw this in the music, it meant suddenly legato, suddenly smooth. So on the top of the second column, you'll see our next one. We have crescendo, poco, a poco. So we saw crescendo in a previous lesson, so we're going to gradually get louder. But poco means little. So we're going to get louder little by little. The next one is a tempo. So a tempo just means we're going to return to the tempo that we had at the beginning of the piece. So sometimes you'll be one tempo and then we'll change for maybe 2 pages. But now they want you to go back to as it was in the beginning. So you'll see a tempo. Here is poco rit as opposed to molto rit. Poco means just a little slowdown. As we talked about this one, UNIS, unison. That means we're all going to be singing the same pitches. Maybe they're octavely displaced, but we are all singing the same pitches. This one, if you saw the 8VA in the piano part, this is one I appreciate. 8VA means you're simply going to play 1 octave higher. This comes in handy for notes that are super high on the piano, but you don't want to read many ledger lines above. So that's a marking that I like, and we'll talk about that one a little bit more later. Well, thank you for joining me for lesson 6 of our music reading series as we focused on reading choir music. Next time we're going to dive into a little bit more of reading piano music, as well as taking a look at what handbell music actually looks like. It's a different world, my friends, and I look forward to bringing that to you. Well, thank you for joining me today, and I hope to see you next time. Have a great rest of your day.